Hey guys, last week we talked about simplifying expressions by combining like terms. This week we're going to focus on simplifying expressions using different properties. And the most important property that you'll use a lot in algebra is this property called the distributive property. All right. Now, the distributive property is going to utilize the operation of multiplication. Okay, so every time I talk about the distributive property, I'm going to be referring to the operation of multiplication. So I want you guys to write that in. All right, the idea of distributing is called distributing because you actually are going to take something from the outside. Okay, so if we look at this example, we're going to take a variable or a number from the outside and we're going to distribute or give it to the inside. And what Miss Bennett likes to call this is a song and dance. This is a song and dance where everyone dances with everyone. Okay, so write that down. Everyone dances together. Okay, and what I mean with that, when I say that, is if I have something, for instance, like, let's say I have I'm going to come up with the number 3, and it's being multiplied by a x plus y. Well, what I'm doing is I'm going to make sure 3 dances with x and 3 also dances with y by multiplication. So I would write this out as distributive property as 3x, again dancing, plus 3y. Now let's talk about what happens here when you distribute. You're going to either be distributing variables or numbers, or you'll be distributing a combination of both. When variables and numbers are involved, you're going to multiply numbers and you're going to put all variables together. For variables, first let's go ahead and let's look at the examples that I gave you. So in this example over here, I have a number that I'm going to be multiplying to the quantity b plus c. So I'm taking 7, multiplying it to b plus c. B and c are variables. 7 is a number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using this concept of just putting everything together because I can't multiply 7 times a bi. There's nothing I can do with that. So the only thing I can do is just put them together. So when I go make the 7 dance with the b and the 7 dance with the c by multiplication, I'm just going to put them together. I'll end up with a 7b. Again, they're dancing together, plus a 7c. Okay? That is distributive property, song and dance. Now let's go to number 2. Example number 2. In example 2, guys, look at that. I got a 2 on the outside, and it's going to dance with my b, But look, it's also going to dance with and we got to be careful, a negative 3c. So here's the song and dance that's going to happen. We're going to multiply the numbers, and then we're going to put all the variables together. So 2 dancing with the B, I can just put those together. All right. So I would have a 2B. Okay. But then let's look, and I'm going to make my B like this, so it looks like an actual B. There we go. And not a 6. There we go. Then let's look at the next one. I take the 2 and I have to multiply it. I want to multiply both the numbers together, and then I'll put the variable next to it. So I really have a negative, and I'll write this in red pen, but I really have a negative 3 times 2, right? Because I want it to dance with the 2. And then I grab my variable C. So I just put C next to it. So your numbers you multiply together and just put your variables, just write your variables in. So I want to simplify it. Well, a 2B is just going to be 2B. Okay. And this would be minus, well, 3 times 2 is 6. So this is going to be a negative 6 or a minus 6C. Okay, pay attention to that. Now let's go over to the next situation where you only have variables. And I know you guys are like, oh, I love math until variables are in. But when you're talking about the distributive property, when you see variables only, that's a good thing. Okay, so this is a good thing. Why? Because we only write them together. Okay, so we write them together. That's it. It's so easy when it's just variables. You just write the 2 variables together. So this example, I am taking A and distributing it into the quantity B plus C. So I want to make A dance with B, and I want to make A dance with C. So when I do this, I will end up with a B, again, just writing them together, plus a times C, or a AC. Another thing, guys, I want you to make note of, and we'll talk about this more in the video, but when you write variables only, make sure you simplify it by putting them in alphabetical order as they appear. So I don't want to have this first term, if I ended up with a BA, so if some of you did the work and you end up with a BA and a CA, make sure for each term you put A first because it comes first in the alphabet. All right. Now let's look at the next one. I am going to distribute by multiplying the A, letting it dance with everything inside of the B minus C. Okay. So I end up with a BA, or B times A, minus CA. Now notice I did it this way because I want you to see what I'm talking about. Notice I wrote A in the back. I don't want to do that. I want to simplify that and make sure that it's in alphabetical order. So I know A comes first in the alphabet. So I want to put A first, and then I'll put B after. Okay, this is just math notation. You always want your variables to show in alphabetical order. So that'll be, I would have an AB minus, and again, I'm going to put my A first, and then I'll put my C after because it comes next in the alphabet. Okay. All right, let's move along. Let's do some examples of distributive property, and then you'll have a chance to practice. So first one, I got a 7 times an X, and a 7 times a 4. That's what that means. I want to take 7 times both of those. So I'll write it out. Now I got a variable here. Variable, that x is a variable. So I'm just going to write 7 and x together. 7x. That's my multiplication. Plus, now the number, I'm going to write them out. I'm going to say this is 7 times 4. And then my next step, I'm just going to simplify all of this. Okay, so 7x will just stay the same. It'll be 7x plus 7 times 4. 7 times 4 is 28. So my answer is 7x plus 28. All right, so you're writing together the variable and the number, and you're writing out the expression. Let's look at the next one. We got a 2 times the quantity b minus 3. That means distribution. I distribute the 2 to the b and the 2 to the negative 3. Now, again, I said if a variable's involved, I'm just going to write them together. So this is just 2b, or 2 times b, 2b. Then I have a minus. I'm going to write this out. So 3 times 2. I'll actually write out 3 times 2, so I don't make a mistake. Now I'm going to simplify, okay? I know this is just 2b, okay? And then negative 3 times 2. Don't forget this is negative. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, okay? Write it all out. Let's go to the next one. Now, I see it together, negative 4 times y plus 3, all right? So I am going to go ahead and, again, distribute. If variables involved, I write them together. I do not forget the negative in front. So this is a negative 4y. I just put them together. Now, negative 4 times 3. Well, that's I'm going to write it out. So I got a plus 3 times negative 4. All right. So write out the numbers, put the variables together. Now it's time to simplify. All right. So I'm going to bring down the negative 4y. I can't change that. And then plus a 3 times a negative 4. We know that's going to be negative. So this is going to be a negative 12. All right. And if I look at this here, that's actually going to be negative, right? If I got a plus or minus, that's negative. So I'll rewrite this, guys, as negative 4y minus 12. Let's go down to this next one. I got a negative 5 times m and m minus 2, okay? This is telling me distribute that negative 5 all the way through. So I write it out. I put together the variables. So this would be a negative 5m. And then I would have a minus 2 times negative 5. Okay, now I'm going to simplify my expression. Negative 5m just stays negative 5m. Now, negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, if you forgot that, we need to write our plus, remember my chart? I'll write it over here. So those of you who are still tricked up with your negatives and positives, I'll write it here. So recall this chart up here that told me how to handle my positives and negatives when multiplying. I'll refer up here again if I forget. Okay, this is a case that you're going to get. Number 5 is a case that you will get. If I look at number 5, it has a negative outside of the parentheses. Okay, a negative outside of this quantity. This is still distributive property, okay? What we're going to do is you're going to put an equal sign, and what I want you to write when you see a negative outside, you're going to change that to a -1. That just means -1 times the quantity y minus 9. Okay, so change it to a -1. And now we'll do the same thing. We're going to distribute the -1 in by multiplication. Remember, what you can't, if anything's with a variable, I just write it together. So a -1 times y is just going to be -1y. And then I have to write out the numbers. So this would be a -9 times -1. All right. Now I want to go ahead and simplify everything. Well, a -1y is just going to be a -1y. A -9 times -1 is going to be a +9, right? Because I got 2 negatives. Look at the graph. 2 negatives means a positive. A -9 times -1 is +9. All right, now let's go to the next one. I see an 8 outside of the quantity 4 minus b. That tells me I need to distribute. So let's distribute that 8 in. And I know when I see numbers, I write them out. So this is going to be a 8 times 4 minus, I see letters, I write it together, or variables. So this would be minus 8b. Okay, now I'm going to simplify the variable or not the variables, this expression, I'll simplify it. 8 times 4. Well, 8 times 4 is 32 minus 8b. Okay, let's go to the next one. A -4. Again, that's telling me to distribute it into everything in the parentheses. Okay, I'm going to write it all out. If it's a variable, I just write them together. If it is numbers, I'm going to write it out. So this is saying -4 W. I just write it out. And I guess this one, I'm sorry, Miss Bennett messed this up because that is not just W, but it looks like there's a negative W there. So I got -4, and if it's negative variable, I'll just put -W in parentheses, okay? Minus, and I'm going to say a 10 times -4. Look at that. Now I'm going to simplify it, and guys, if I have this case where the variable is negative, I'm just going to simplify it like this. I see 2 negatives, and I go back to my chart because this is still multiplication. 2 negatives make a positive, all right? So I refer back to my chart. So I can just change this -4 times -W to a 4W. And then I have a -10 times a -4. Well, -10 times -4 is just positive, right? 40. Let's go to the next one. 5 times the quantity 2m minus 3. Again, that's distribution. We have to distribute. Now look at this. You're like, Miss Bennett, I see a variable and I see a number. So what do I do? Well, remember I said if numbers are involved, you're still going to write it out. Even if that variable's there, we're still going to write it out. So what I want you to do is write this like this. I'm taking 5 times 2 times m, okay? And then I subtract that from 3 times 5. Now I'll simplify it. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and simplify it. 5 times 2m, well, that's going to be a 10m minus a negative, and this is negative, negative 3 times 5. Well, negative 3, a negative times a positive gives me a negative. So I know this is going to be a negative 15. All right, let's go to the next one. Negative 3 times 2x minus 4. Again, we're writing it out. We'll write it out. Even though it's a variable there, because that number's there, we gotta write it out. So I'm going to say this is negative 3 times 2x. Okay? And then I'll have minus 4 times negative 3. Again, using that negative 3, distributing and multiplying it to both numbers. All right, negative 3 times 2x. Well, that's just a negative 6x. So I got a negative 6x minus negative 4. Let's see, I got a negative 4 times a negative 3. So 2 negatives, guys. Let's go back up to our chart. 2 negatives make a positive. So this is going to be a plus 12. And I need to erase so plus 12. All right, guys, we'll go through the next couple of problems. Okay, we got a 3m plus n. Again, that is distribution. So I'm distributing it to each problem. All right, so I am going to put variables. When I just see number in a variable, I just write it together. So this is just 3m. And the same plus the n, I just write them together. This would be 3n. All right, guys. I'm going to pause it. The next two, I want you to try. Now, notice it is a variable. So what do we do with our variables? All right, take a second. Let me see what you got. Take a second. And let me see what you got for 11 and 12. Okay, did you get what I got? Check your work. Let me know. Confirm e-learners in the chat. Let me know. Did you get what I got? Okay, guys, here's something that I want you to pay attention to with problem 11. You probably both just put together xy plus x to the 4th. You probably put them both together, or not x to the 4th, x times 4. The thing is, when we're writing algebraically, we want to make sure that we always have the number in the front. So if you notice what Ms. Bennett did is I rewrote this. XY is okay, but then I put the 4 in the front. So I ended up with a plus 4x. Okay, so please, please, please be careful with that. Make sure your numbers are always in front of your variables. The next one, guys, you probably got d times c, or dc, minus d times 4. Again, what I want you guys to do is to put your numbers in front of the variables. So you're going to change this to 4D, okay? The other thing is I want you to make sure it's in alphabetical order. Notice Ms. Bennett put C in front of D. Not a big deal, but something that I want you to pay attention to. When you have two variables together, you want to put them in alphabetical order, okay? So I put C first in front of D. All right, let's look at the next one. We'll do the next one together. I got a 6A. Now this has a variable with it. So that means that I'm going to use the same rule. I'll write the variables together. So this is going to just be a 6AB plus, and then I multiply it times the 2C. Now this is tricky, guys. This is something that we need to write out. We're going to write out the numbers and then put the variables together. So I'm going to say this is 6 times 2, okay? And then I'm going to put the variables together, A, C. Okay, so I got a 6AB plus 6 times 2AC, all right? Then I'll go back in another color and I'll go ahead and simplify this. Okay, so I'm going to now use my red. You don't have to go in another color, but I'm just saying so you can see. I'm going to bring my 6AB. Let me get rid of these arrows so I can have space to write. But 6AB is going to stay 6AB. Plus 6 plus 12, or 6 times 2 is going to be a 12. So this would be a 12 and then a C.